The phone rang in this quiet of my Virginia kitchen. I was finishing the last sip of coffee, watching dawn paint the sky in shades of pink and gold through the window. The name on the screen made my hand pause halfway to setting the cup down. Margaret Hayes, my mother. Something, maybe that last stubborn thread of hope I'd never quite managed to cut, made me press the green button. Her voice came through with that particular sweetness she reserved for delivering bad news while pretending to be kind. "Victoria, sweetheart." A pause, calculated for effect. "Your father and I have been talking, and we've decided we just can't make it to your medal ceremony. The drive is too much at our age, you understand. And Isabel has the opening of her new art collection in Chicago. You know, the one she's been working toward all year." I set the coffee cup down on the counter with deliberate care. The letter from the White House lay exactly where I'd left it that morning. The presidential seal catching the early light. The words printed across the top in bold: National Medal of Honor for Distinguished Service in Military Conflict. 30 years of service, 8 deployments, a scar along my right side from the bullet that nearly ended everything in Kandahar, and my parents were choosing my sister's art show. Let me make sure I understand. My voice came out calm, each word measured with the precision of 3 decades in uniform. The President of the United States will personally present me with this medal, and you can't attend because of an art gallery opening? Silence on the other end. Then that long theatrical sigh I'd heard 1,000 times before. "Don't make this difficult, Victoria. We've always supported your little passion. You should be proud we even let you join the military when so many families would have stopped you. But Isabel's career is really taking off now. This opening, it's her once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Surely you understand that." Little passion. The words landed like they always did, precise and cutting. I'd commanded 200 soldiers, saved 14 lives during an ambush that should have killed us all, mentored 50 young officers who now led units of their own. But to my mother, it was all just a little passion, while Isabel painted abstract pieces that sold to people with more money than sense. "I understand completely, Mom." My voice remained steady, the kind of steady that comes from learning to control everything when the world around you is falling apart. "I understand perfectly." I ended the call. The silence that followed felt heavier than the metal would be around my neck. I didn't cry. Soldiers don't cry when facing injustice. They plan. I opened my laptop and pulled up the email from the ceremony coordinator. Subject line, guest list revision. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for exactly 3 seconds. Then I typed, "Seat A17, Robert Hayes. Delete, Seat A18, Margaret Hayes. Delete Seat A19, Isabel Hayes. Delete." But I didn't stop there. I added a note, each word chosen with care. "Please keep the name placards on these seats. Leave them empty with the full names visible. I want everyone to know they were invited and that they chose not to come." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Sometimes absence speaks louder than presence. Sometimes an empty chair is the most powerful indictment. And I was about to show the entire world exactly what kind of family I had. The memory came without invitation, the way they always did. 16 years old, autumn of 1986, standing in my childhood home, wearing a JROTC uniform for the first time. It wasn't the real thing, just the high school version. But I'd pressed it until you could see your reflection in the fabric. Shoes polished to a mirror shine, cap angled at precisely 45 degrees according to the manual. I wanted them to see me, for the first time in my life. My father sat in his worn leather recliner, newspaper held up like a shield. "Isn't that a bit much for school, Victoria?" The words came without him even lowering the paper to look. My mother stood at the kitchen counter, arranging paint tubes for Isabel, 10 years old then, already being called a prodigy by an overeager art teacher. "The military is just a phase, sweetheart." Mom glanced over, her tone dismissive in that way she'd perfected. "You'll grow out of it. Maybe find something more feminine." Isabel, seated in the middle of her art supplies like a tiny queen, let out a giggle that cut sharper than any blade. Victoria's playing soldier? That's so cute. Her smile was sugar sweet and poison tipped. Maybe next time you can borrow my toy gun. It would look more real. I stood there in that uniform feeling its weight, not from the fabric, but from the absolute indifference it was met with. That wasn't the first time. And it definitely wasn't the last. The pattern repeated itself with clockwork precision over the following years. When Isabel won third place in a regional art competition, my parents threw a party, invited the neighbors, bought a 2-tier cake with her name in frosting. My mother spent an entire week planning, making sure every detail was perfect. Every guest knew about our talented daughter. When I won first place statewide for JROTC leadership, my father muttered, "That's nice," without looking up from his evening news. When Isabel got accepted to a summer art school, my father drove 8 hours round trip to ensure she arrived early and well rested. He personally arranged her dorm room, hung her clothes, made her bed with military precision he'd never shown for actual military achievement. When I got accepted to an elite JROTC training camp, my parents couldn't remember the dates. They handed me $20 for gas and reminded me to be careful out there. My mother kept a shelf in the living room dedicated to Isabel's trophies and ribbons. They sparkled under carefully positioned lights, a shrine to perfection. My certificates and medals ended up shoved in my bedroom drawer. After a while, I stopped showing them. One afternoon burned itself into my memory with particular clarity. I was 17, May of 1987. Isabel had just won first place at a national art competition. My mother organized a massive celebration. 50 people, banners, even hired a professional photographer to document our rising star. That same evening, I had my academic awards ceremony. My essay on leadership in crisis had won first place nationally, a $15,000 scholarship, and an invitation from West Point. I'd told them 3 weeks in advance, reminded them 5 times. They didn't come. My mother called afterward, her voice tired. "Sorry, honey, Isabel's party ran long. You understand, right? This is a big moment for her." I stood alone in the school auditorium, holding my certificate and the scholarship check. Around me, other families hugged their children, took photos, cried with pride. On my side, empty silence. That was the night I understood. In this family, I would always be Isabel's footnote. But it was also the night I decided they wouldn't write my story anymore. Summer of 1988. I woke at 5 in the morning on the day I was supposed to leave for West Point. My bags were packed, sitting by the door like sentinels. The bus to the academy departed at 7. On the kitchen counter, my mother had left a yellow sticky note. "Good luck, don't forget to write home." Mom, no goodbye breakfast, no farewell embrace. My father was already at work. Isabel was still asleep, exhausted from her own celebration party. She'd gotten into the Rhode Island School of Design, and my parents had thrown what they called the event of the year. I called a taxi. During the ride, the driver caught my eye in the rear-view mirror. "Military Academy, huh? Your folks must be real proud." I smiled without feeling it reach my eyes. "Yeah, sure they are." If my childhood was an emotional desert, West Point was a firestorm. The first morning run up that hill made me think my lungs would burst. My boots rubbed blisters so deep I could barely walk. Drill sergeants screamed until the air itself seemed to vibrate with their fury. But for the first time in my entire life, I wasn't invisible. I was measured, tested, seen, and I excelled. Not because I was special, but because I'd grown up fighting for recognition. When you spend your life in a house where you have to shout to be heard, being yelled at to improve feels almost comforting. First year, bottom of the rankings. But I didn't quit. Second year, top 25%. Started leading small teams. Third year, top 10%. Selected as a unit assistant commander. Fourth year, graduated with honors. Ranked 8th out of 1,000 cadets. Meanwhile, from home, Isabel sent 1 postcard in 4 years. "School's amazing. Wish you could see my work. Izzy." My mother called once a month, usually to tell me about Isabel's latest achievement. My father never called at all. Graduation day at West Point arrived with the weight of everything I'd worked for. 1,000 families filled the stands. Flags rippled in the wind. Cadets marched in dress whites, the sound of synchronized boots like thunder. I scanned the crowd for them. Row A, seats marked Hayes Family, A17, 1819, completely empty. They didn't come. My mother had called 2 days prior. Victoria, honey, we're so sorry. Isabel has this important gallery show in New York. Big venue. Could be her breakthrough. You understand, don't you? In that moment, I thought it might break me. Instead, it forged steel. Because I realized something crucial. Respect isn't given like flowers at a performance. It's earned. And whether they showed up or not, I had earned mine. While Isabel built her art career with noise and spotlights, I built something different, quiet but solid as bedrock. Over 30 years, I deployed 8 times to combat zones. I commanded units ranging from 30 to 200 soldiers. I received commendations for valor, leadership, and strategic thinking. I mentored young officers who went on to lead their own commands. But my family knew almost none of it. What they knew. Victoria travels a lot. 8 combat deployments. What they knew. She has some military job. Company commander, battalion operations officer, executive officer to a general. What they knew. Still single, still no kids. Because I was too busy saving lives. What they never asked about, what I'd actually built. After 3 decades of military service, with careful investments and living below my means, I'd accumulated something my family never suspected. $2.3 million in my military retirement account, $890,000 in a diversified investment portfolio I'd built by reading finance books during long deployments, a $650,000 home in Virginia, fully paid off, a lifetime pension of $8,500 per month, starting at age 52, total net worth, just under $4 million. Meanwhile, Isabel still rented a studio apartment in Brooklyn, still carried credit card debt from investing in her art, still had irregular income that depended on whether wealthy collectors felt generous that month. But guess who the family thought was successful? The evening after my mother called about not attending the medal ceremony, my phone rang again. Isabel. I hesitated, then answered. Her voice came through with forced enthusiasm. Vic, Mom told me you were disappointed about us not being able to come to your ceremony. But you understand, right? My career is at such a crucial point. The Hudson Gallery is considering long-term representation. This could be my breakthrough. Her 47th breakthrough this year. I understand. My voice remained flat, emotionless. Great. Oh, and Vic, could you if you could lend me a little? Just $3,000. I need to pay this month's studio rent and materials for the new show. You know how it is, starving artist life. She laughed lightly. Not like you. The military pays steady, right? For one long moment, I said nothing. This was the 12th time in 5 years that Isabel had asked me to loan money. Total borrowed, $28,000. Total repaid, $0.00. Not this time, Isabel. Seriously? Her voice turned cold instantly. Rich Victoria is stingy with her struggling artist sister. That's just great. Isabel, I've lent you $28,000 over 5 years. You haven't repaid a single cent. That's because I'm investing in my art, Victoria. Not everyone has a boring, stable job like you. Some of us actually pursue our passions. I ended the call. That night, I sat in my quiet kitchen, laptop open before me. In my inbox, 47 emails from colleagues, former commanders, soldiers I'd once led, all congratulating me on the medal. From my family, silence. I opened a new document and began typing. Plan. Medal ceremony. Objective. Not revenge. Truth. Tactics. 1. Keep empty seats with name placards visible. 2. Ensure local media attends. 3. Prepare speech about those who truly support us. 4. Invite the people who actually matter. I drafted an email. 2. Former commanders, fellow soldiers, officers I trained. Subject. Invitation to National Medal of Honor ceremony. You are the family I chose. When I hit send, A cold smile touched my lips. They wanted to ignore me? Fine. The whole world was about to see exactly who they'd ignored. 3 months before the medal ceremony, an invitation arrived via email. Not a real invitation, just a text message. Vic, my engagement party is this Saturday in Fairfax. Mom says I should invite you if you're in the country. Dress code, elegant cocktail. Try not to wear, military stuff. Izzy. I stared at the message for a long time, my heart heavy with the realization that this wasn't an invitation. It was an obligation. But I decided to go, not for Isabel, but because I needed to see them one last time with clear eyes. The night of Isabel's engagement party arrived with all the manufactured elegance my family loved. I walked into the Fairmont Hotel wearing a simple black dress. Not showy, but dignified. I didn't wear my uniform, but I did pin a small eagle insignia to my collar, the symbol of a lieutenant colonel. The ballroom sparkled with excessive decoration. Fresh flowers everywhere, an elaborate buffet spread, a jazz band playing in the corner. Approximately 120 guests, mostly Isabel's artist friends and her fiancé's family. Isabel stood at the center in a billowing white lace dress, her diamond engagement ring the size of a pebble catching every light. When I entered, she looked at me. Her smile faltered for just a second before stretching wide again, artificial as the flowers. "Victoria, I didn't think you'd make it." She hugged me quickly, whispering in my ear, "Thanks for not wearing the uniform. Mom was worried." I stepped back, smiling without warmth. "I know when to blend in, Isabel." My father appeared first, slightly drunk, his hand heavy on my shoulder. "Victoria, still playing soldier? I told your mother you'd grow out of it eventually. When are you going to find a real job?" My mother followed, her kiss on my cheek as cold as January frost. "You look tired, dear. Is it all that traveling? You should think about settling down, finding someone stable. You're 54 now." Isabel's friends whispered just loud enough for me to hear. "That's Isabel's sister, the military one. Isn't she lonely? No husband, no kids, just work." I stood there holding a glass of lemon water, feeling like a museum exhibit in the wrong gallery. I slipped out to the balcony, needing air. Outside, the Virginia night was cool against my skin. I leaned against the railing, my hands trembling slightly, not from cold, but from emotions rising like a tide. For the first time in 30 years, I felt it. The crack. Not anger, not bitterness, exhaustion. Exhaustion from fighting to be seen. Exhaustion from pretending it didn't hurt. The first tear fell. I wiped it away quickly, angry at myself for weakness. "No, Victoria," I whispered to myself. "Not here. Not for them." I took 3 deep breaths, the kind they teach you in training, and walked back inside. When I returned, my face was a mask of perfect calm, because soldiers don't let people see them break. They go invisible until they're strong enough to strike. My father stood up during dinner, champagne glass in hand, his face flushed red. "I want to raise a glass to my daughter, Isabel." His voice boomed with pride. "She's made this family proud since she was a little girl. Talented artist, wonderful woman. We always knew she'd do great things." Everyone applauded. Isabel stood, hugged him, tears of pride in her eyes. Then my father glanced at me, as if just remembering I existed, and added, "Oh, and Victoria's here too, our older daughter. She travels a lot for work." That was it. No mention of 30 years of service, nothing about the medal, nothing. Polite laughter rippled through the room. A few people looked at me with pity. Isabel gave an embarrassed smile, shrugging as if to say, "You know, Dad." And in that moment, something inside me locked into place. Not anger, not hurt. Cold determination, sharp as a surgical blade. 2 days after the engagement party, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. "Victoria, this is Uncle Raymond." Uncle Raymond, my father's older brother, someone I hadn't spoken to since I was 19. He and my father had cut ties after a massive argument no one ever explained to me. "Uncle Raymond?" Surprise colored my voice. "I know it's been a long time, but I just watched video from Isabel's engagement party online, and I think it's time you knew some things." We met at a small cafe in Richmond. Uncle Raymond looked older than I remembered. 82 now, hair completely silver, but his eyes remained sharp. He brought a shoebox with him, worn and faded. "You need to see what's inside." He pushed it across the table. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside, stacks of letters, papers, envelopes, all addressed to me. I pulled out the first one, a faded envelope, postmark 1987. Dear Victoria Hayes, National Young Women's Leadership Scholarship Value, $25,000 response deadline, June 15th, 1987. I'd never seen this before in my life. My hands shook as I reached for the next one, then another, then another. An invitation to a STEM leadership program for young women, a national shooting sports scholarship, an interview invitation from the Air Force Academy, a Youth of the Year award from the mayor's office, a congratulatory letter from our local congresswoman about my JROTC achievements, all addressed to my home, none of which I'd ever seen. "Why?" My voice came out as a whisper. "Why do you have these?" Uncle Raymond sighed heavily. "Your father and I fought that year because I discovered Margaret, your mother, had been intercepting your mail. She and your father decided that if you got too many scholarships and recognition, you'd overshadow Isabel. They thought Isabel needed to stay focused on her art, and you were too competitive. They hid them?" My voice rose. People in the cafe turned to look, but I didn't care. "Not just hid, actively sabotaged." Uncle Raymond pulled out another letter. Handwritten, my mother's penmanship. "Dear Scholarship Committee, I am writing to inform you that my daughter, Victoria Hayes, has decided not to accept your scholarship. Our family has other plans for her future. Sincerely, Margaret Hayes." I read it once, twice, 3 times. My brain refused to process. Mom declined a $25,000 scholarship on my behalf when I was 17? Not just that one. Not just. Uncle Raymond produced more letters. "Your father also contacted the Air Force Academy, told them you'd changed your mind. They withdrew their offer." I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor with a harsh sound. "They stole my future." My voice shook. "They stole everything." Uncle Raymond stood, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry, Victoria. I tried to intervene, but your father threatened to cut me out completely. I thought at least you found your own path. West Point, the military. You succeeded without them, but you deserve to know the truth." I sat back down, my head spinning. Every time I thought I wasn't good enough, it wasn't because I was inadequate. It was because they had blocked me. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table, the shoebox contents spread before me. Each paper was a piece of the life I'd been robbed of. Anger simmered, not the hot kind, but the cold, patient, strategic kind. I opened my laptop and typed, "Plan revision." Step 1, scan all letters, create digital evidence. Step 2, contact lawyer to verify legal standing, not to sue, just to understand rights. Step 3, prepare speech for medal ceremony, mention those who truly support. Step 4, contact local media, ensure they know the story behind the woman. Step 5, on the day, let the truth speak for itself. This wasn't revenge. This was justice. Not about tearing them down, about refusing to let them define me anymore. 2 weeks before the medal ceremony, I began executing my plan with military precision. Email 1, sent to 50-plus former military colleagues. Subject, "You are the family I chose." Over 30 years of service, I learned that family isn't about blood. It's about who stands beside you in darkness. I would be honored if you, my true family, would attend the National Medal of Honor ceremony. VIP seating has been reserved for you. Lieutenant Colonel Victoria Hayes. 30 people responded within an hour. All confirmed attendance. Email 2, sent to the Richmond Times-Dispatch editor. Subject, the story behind the medal. I am Victoria Hayes, a local woman about to receive the Medal of Honor from the President. I'd like to share the story of a woman who built a 30-year military career despite having no family support. Would this be a story your readers care about? They responded within 2 hours. "We'd love to meet with you." The interview took place in my living room. Maria Chen, the reporter, was 40, sharp-eyed and attentive. "Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, thank you for sharing your story. Tell me about your family. They must be so proud." I paused. This was the moment. "Actually, my family won't be attending the medal ceremony. They have other priorities." Maria's brow furrowed. "Other priorities? For a presidential medal?" I smiled sadly. "My family never understood my military career. They considered it a little passion. Meanwhile, my sister, an artist, has always been the center of all attention. Even now, when you're receiving the nation's highest honor? Even now, they chose my sister's art show over my medal ceremony." Maria's pen flew across her notepad. "That's astonishing and heartbreaking. How do you feel?" I met her eyes. "I feel free, because I realized I don't need their approval to know my worth. The 200 soldiers I brought home safely, that's my family. The comrades who saved my life and whose lives I saved, that's my family." The article published 3 days before the ceremony went viral. Headline: "Local veteran receives Medal of Honor, but family won't attend." 10,000 social media shares. Hundreds of comments from veterans, older women, people abandoned by their families. My mother called, her voice furious. "Victoria, what have you done? Making us look like monsters. The neighbors are asking why we're not attending your ceremony." "Do you want to come, Mom?" Silence. "Of course we do, but..." "Then come. I haven't canceled your seats. They're still waiting, with your name, Dad's, and Isabel's on them." "Victoria, you can't..." I ended the call. The night before the medal ceremony, I stood before my mirror in full dress uniform. Old medals across my chest. Lieutenant Colonel rank on my shoulders. Service ribbons representing 30 years. I didn't see the woman abandoned by her family. I saw the soldier who exceeded every definition they'd tried to force on me. Tomorrow, the whole world would see. And 3 empty chairs would speak louder than any words. My phone buzzed one final time. A text from Isabel. "Vic, we're coming tomorrow. Mom's freaking out about the article. See you there." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "The seats are there, with your names on them. Whether you sit in them is your choice." I set the phone down and looked at myself in the mirror one last time. Tomorrow wasn't about them anymore. Tomorrow was about every person who'd ever been told their dreams didn't matter. Every person made invisible by the people who should have loved them most. And I was ready. Morning arrived with the kind of clarity that comes after a sleepless night spent making irreversible decisions. I dressed in stages, each piece of my uniform a ritual of transformation. The fabric settled against my shoulders with familiar weight, decades of service woven into every thread. My reflection showed someone I barely recognized from the girl who'd stood in a kitchen 38 years ago, desperate for a glance of recognition. That girl had vanished somewhere between the desert heat of my first deployment and the cold certainty of my last. The National Conference Center stood imposing against the gray Washington sky. 500 seats arranged in perfect rows. Crystal chandeliers throwing fractured light across polished marble. American flags flanked by service banners. Each fold precise as a promise. I arrived 90 minutes early, boots echoing in the empty space. My eyes went immediately to row A, the VIP section reserved for family. 3 seats, 3 name placards, printed in elegant script: A17, Robert Hayes; A18, Margaret Hayes; A19, Isabel Hayes. All empty, exactly as I'd planned. Behind them, rows B through D were already filling. 47 veterans in various uniforms, some with canes, others in wheelchairs, all arriving early because military habits die harder than hope. These men and women had flown from California, driven from Texas, taken buses from Ohio. Not one had hesitated when I invited them. By 11:30, the room hummed with arriving guests. Local media crews positioned cameras with practiced efficiency. They'd all read the article. They knew the story beneath the ceremony. I watched from backstage as people noticed the empty front row. The name placards drew eyes like wounds. Whispers multiplied, spreading through the crowd in waves. A woman in her 60s leaned toward her husband, voice carrying, "Can you imagine her own family missing this? What kind of people?" From row B, Captain James Morrison spoke loud enough for 10 people to hear. "Who needs blood family when you've got brothers and sisters who die for you? We're here. That's what matters." Murmured agreement from surrounding veterans, heads nodding in unified disgust at the abandonment those empty seats represented. 11:45. The doors opened again. 3 figures entered, moving with the uncomfortable stiffness of people arriving somewhere they didn't want to be. My father, 78 and rigid in a black suit that looked borrowed from a funeral. My mother, 76, clutching her navy purse like a shield. Isabel, 48, in a pink dress, completely wrong for the occasion, already checking her phone. They came after all. I stood in the wings, watching through the gap in the curtain. They found their seats marked with their names, sat down with visible reluctance. Mom glanced around, discomfort written across every line of her face. "Why is everyone staring?" Dad muttered under his breath. "That damn article made us look like villains." Isabel didn't look up from her screen, thumb scrolling through whatever held more importance than this moment. I felt nothing resembling victory. Instead, a strange clarity settled over me, cold and absolute. They weren't here for me. They were here because social pressure left them no choice. Noon arrived with military punctuality. The master of ceremonies stepped to the podium, his voice filling the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the National Medal of Honor ceremony. Today, we recognize a woman who has given 30 years to this nation, Lieutenant Colonel Victoria Hayes." Applause rippled through the audience, building like distant thunder. "To present the medal, we are honored to welcome the Deputy Secretary of Defense, General Michael Brennan, representing the President of the United States." General Brennan emerged from stage left, 62, uniform weighted with decades of ribbons, face carved by command decisions and consequence. His presence commanded immediate silence. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes is not merely a soldier. His voice carried without amplification, trained by years of addressing troops. She is a leader, a mentor, and a hero. In 2009, during an ambush in hostile territory, she risked her life to extract 14 personnel, navigating them through 18 hours of enemy fire. She left no one behind. The room held its breath. Today, on behalf of the President and a grateful nation, I present the National Medal of Honor for Distinguished Service. His eyes found mine in the wings, giving a slight nod. "Please rise to welcome Lieutenant Colonel Victoria Hayes." The applause when I stepped into the light felt like walking into a physical force. Every eye tracked my movement as I crossed the stage, spine straight, chin level, gaze fixed forward. I didn't look at the front row. Not yet. My attention belonged to what mattered, the truth standing behind my family's empty gesture. General Brennan's handshake was firm, the metal heavy and cool as it settled against my chest. He leaned close, voice low enough for only me. "Blood family can fail you. Chosen family never will. Look around." I turned toward the audience. Rows B through D erupted into synchronized motion. 47 veterans rising as one, hands snapping to their foreheads in perfect salute. Some had tears tracking down weathered faces. Others wore fierce pride like armor. Every single one stood there, because I mattered to them, in ways my parents never comprehended. The microphone waited, slim and silver, amplifying the silence before I spoke. "Thank you, General Brennan. Thank you, Mr. President." I paused, let the moment stretch. "And thank you to my family, my true family." My gaze swept across the veteran section, deliberately bypassing row A. 30 years taught me that family isn't determined by who gave birth to you. Family is determined by who stands beside you when the world tries to break you, who believes in you when others don't, who sees your value when others are blind. I let my eyes drop to the front row for the first time. Mom flinched. Dad stared at his hands. Isabel still hadn't looked up from her phone. Some of us aren't born into families that know how to love us properly. But we're fortunate, incredibly fortunate, to find the people who do. The applause that followed shook the chandeliers. But from row A, absolute silence. The reception room afterward filled quickly with well-wishers, media requests, veterans sharing war stories with the easy camaraderie of shared survival. I moved through the crowd accepting congratulations, feeling their pride wrap around me, like the family embrace I'd never received at home. Then I saw them hovering at the room's edge, three figures out of place among the uniforms in genuine joy. I walked over because avoiding them would give them power I'd spent 30 years reclaiming. Mom spoke first, her voice trembling with something that might have been sincerity if I didn't know her so well. "Victoria, you did wonderfully up there." "Thank you for coming." My tone held professional courtesy and nothing warmer. Dad cleared his throat, shoulders shifting with discomfort. "We need to talk. Not here." "About that newspaper article." "About the truth?" I cut through his attempt at deflection. "Which part wasn't accurate, Dad?" Silence answered me. Isabel finally lifted her eyes from her phone, irritation creasing her forehead. "I can't believe you did this, making us look like jokes in front of the entire town." "I didn't make you anything, Isabel. I revealed what already existed." I reached into my uniform pocket, fingers closing around the envelope I'd prepared for exactly this confrontation. Inside were copies, scanned images of every letter they'd hidden, every opportunity they'd stolen, including Mom's handwritten scholarship rejection signed in my name. I handed the envelope to my mother without ceremony. Her hands shook as she opened it, color draining from her face faster than water from a cracked glass. "What is—" "You know exactly what it is." Dad took the papers, scanning the first page. His expression collapsed into something between shame and defense. "Victoria, this was it 30 years ago. You stole my opportunities." Each word landed with surgical precision. "Mom destroyed my future, all because you couldn't risk me outshining Isabel." Isabel snatched the pages, reading with widening eyes. Shock gave way to recognition, then something that might have been guilt if she'd ever learned to feel it properly. "Mom, you did this?" Mom said nothing, which was answer enough. "Victoria, I'm sorry." Mom's whisper barely reached me. "We thought we were protecting Isabel. She was fragile, needed more attention. And you were always so strong." "I was strong because you forced me to be." My voice didn't rise, but it cut deeper than shouting ever could. "I was strong because I had no other choice." Dad reached for my arm. I stepped back before he could make contact. "Victoria, we're still family." "No, Dad, you're the people who gave birth to me." "But family?" I gestured toward the room filled with veterans. "They're my family." "Victoria, don't do this. You did this 30 years ago. I'm just living with the consequences of your choices." I turned to leave. Isabel called after me, desperation cracking through her usual entitled tone. "Victoria, you can't just—" I stopped, looked back over my shoulder. "Isabel, you were loved, prioritized, protected your entire life. You never had to fight to be seen, so you'll never understand what it means to be me. And that's your privilege." I walked away, leaving them standing in their truth for the first time in our shared history. Outside, early afternoon sun cut through November clouds. A young woman in lieutenant's bars waited near the entrance, shoulders squared but eyes red-rimmed with recent tears. "Lieutenant Colonel Hayes?" I paused. "Yes?" She saluted, which I returned automatically. "Ma'am, I'm Lieutenant Sarah Chen. I read the article about you. My family didn't support me joining the military either. They said it wasn't for women. I was going to quit." My chest tightened with recognition. How many times had I seen this exact expression in the mirror? And now? Her smile broke through tears like dawn through storm clouds. "Now, I know if you could make it, so can I. Thank you for not giving up." I placed my hand on her shoulder, feeling the weight of every woman who'd ever been told she wasn't enough. "Listen carefully, Sarah. Your value doesn't depend on who recognizes it. You don't need anyone's permission to know you're worthy. Understand?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Here's my card. If you need mentorship, someone to believe in you, call me. Understood?" She took the card like I was handing her a lifeline, which perhaps I was. "Thank you, ma'am." As she walked away, something shifted inside me, the last piece of anger dissolving into purpose. This was what mattered, not the medal, not embarrassing my family, giving one young woman the strength to continue. 3 weeks after the ceremony, the phone calls from my family finally stopped. The silence stretched into a different shape than before. Not absence, but distance I deliberately constructed. My days filled with new purpose. Mornings began with coffee on my back porch, watching Virginia's sunrise paint the trees gold. Then calls with former soldiers, now scattered across the country, checking in on their lives and struggles. Tuesday afternoons, I volunteered at the Veterans Center downtown, helping younger vets navigate the bureaucratic maze of benefits and healthcare. Thursday evenings, I mentored 3 female officers through video calls, guiding them through the specific challenges women face in military leadership. The memoir I'd started writing expanded from a personal journal into something bigger, a roadmap for anyone who'd ever been made invisible by the people meant to love them most. My bank account held steady at $4 million, the rental income from investment properties adding cushion I didn't need, but appreciated anyway. Financial independence meant freedom from ever needing to compromise my boundaries again. The family I'd chosen threw a monthly dinner at Roberto's Italian restaurant. Veterans from my various commands gathered around a long table, swapping stories that started with, "Remember when," and ended with laughter that came from surviving the unsurvivable together. These were my people. These dinners were my holiday celebrations, my family reunions, my home. Then one evening in early December, my phone rang with Isabel's number. I almost declined, but curiosity won out. Her voice came through smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Victoria? Isabel." I wanted to apologize, really apologize. I didn't know about the letters. If I had... But you never asked, did you? Fatigue colored my words more than anger. You never wondered why I seemed to have fewer opportunities. Never questioned why the family only celebrated you. You just accepted the spotlight. Silence stretched between us like a bridge neither of us knew how to cross. "I'm sorry. I know you are, but sorry doesn't erase 30 years. So there's never going to be forgiveness?" The question hung heavy. I watched bare tree branches scrape against the darkening sky outside my window. Maybe someday, Isabel. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean inviting you back into my life like nothing happened. You benefited from my sabotage. I have to live with that truth. And you have to live knowing your success was partly built on my suppression. Is that fair? You're asking me about fairness? After everything? I ended the call. The following Saturday brought an unexpected visitor. Uncle Raymond knocked on my door at 10 in the morning, holding a manila folder and wearing an expression caught between relief and regret. "Victoria, do you have time?" I led him to the kitchen table, poured coffee he didn't touch, waited for whatever brought him back into my life. "I wanted you to know something." His weathered hands opened the folder, revealing old photographs. "After your ceremony, your father called me for the first time in 3 decades. He wanted to know if I had any more evidence of what they'd done. Evidence he could destroy. Evidence he wanted to apologize for." Uncle Raymond's eyes met mine. "I don't think he understands how, Victoria. I don't think either of them know how to undo what they built over 40 years. That's not my problem to solve. No, it's not." He pushed one photograph across the table. "But I thought you should have this." The image showed me at 16, JROTC uniform crisp, standing at attention with pride radiating from every line of my young body. Behind me, blurred in the background, Dad stood watching with an expression I'd never seen directed at me, something close to pride before he learned to hide it. "I took this the day you brought that uniform home. Robert saw you differently for about 5 minutes before Margaret convinced him Isabel needed all the attention to reach her potential." Uncle Raymond's voice carried decades of frustration. I tried to tell him he was making a mistake. He chose his wife's fears over his daughter's future. I studied the photo, that ghost of my father's pride now preserved in pixels and regret. "Why are you showing me this?" because holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting them to die. Uncle Raymond stood, leaving the photo behind. I'm not saying forgive them. I'm saying don't let them take anything more from you. You've built something extraordinary despite them. Don't let bitterness become the final thing they steal. After he left, I sat with that photograph for a long time, searching my father's partially visible face for meaning I'd never been given permission to see. The anger I'd carried began shifting shape, not disappearing, but transforming into something more useful, fuel, rather than burden. Mid-December brought an invitation to speak at Hamilton High School, the same school I'd attended nearly 4 decades earlier. The principal, a woman named Dr. Patricia Wong, had read my memoir's early chapters posted online. We want our students to hear from someone who succeeded despite obstacles, especially our young women who don't see themselves represented in traditional success stories. I accepted immediately. The auditorium held 300 students, their faces reflecting varying degrees of interest and skepticism. I stood at the podium in civilian clothes, jeans, a sweater, and the small eagle pin from my uniform. When I was 16, I put on a uniform for the first time. My voice carried without microphone assistance, decades of command making projection instinctive. My family laughed, called it a phase, said I'd grow out of it. Scattered attention sharpened into focus. 30 years later, I retired with a Medal of Honor and a career that saved lives. My family? They skipped my medal ceremony for an art show. Complete silence now, 300 teenagers suddenly invested in where this story led. I'm not telling you this for pity. I'm telling you this because you need to understand something crucial. Your value doesn't depend on who sees it. I stepped away from the podium, closing the distance between speaker and audience. If your parents don't believe in you, it hurts, but it doesn't define you. If your siblings undermine you, it hurts, but it doesn't limit you. If the entire world says you can't, it hurts, but it's not true. A girl in the third row raised her hand tentatively. I nodded toward her. But what if it's your family? Isn't family supposed to be everything? The question everyone was thinking, spoken with teenage directness. Family should support you, should believe in you, should celebrate your victories. I let the pause stretch, but sometimes they don't. And when that happens, you have 2 choices. Shrink yourself to fit their limitations, or build a life that proves them wrong. Which did you choose? I chose to become someone they couldn't ignore. And then I chose to surround myself with people who saw me clearly from the beginning. Another student. A boy near the back. Did your family ever apologize? Eventually. But apologies don't erase decades of damage. They're a starting point, not an ending. Did you forgive them? I considered the question with the honesty it deserved. I'm working on forgiving them for myself, not for them. Because holding on to bitterness only hurts me now. They can't take anything more from me unless I let them. The assembly ended with scattered applause that built into something stronger. Afterward, 17 students lined up to speak with me privately, each carrying their own version of invisible wounds inflicted by people meant to protect them. I gave every single one my contact information. Some battles you fight for yourself, others you fight so the next generation doesn't have to bleed the same way. That evening, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Thank you for Hamilton High." The message came from Dr. Marcus Webb, a professor of psychology at Georgetown. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, I was in the audience today when you spoke to the students. My daughter is a junior at Hamilton. She's been struggling with family pressure to abandon her interest in engineering for something more feminine. After hearing you speak, she came home and told me she's going to apply to MIT. I want you to know, you didn't just give a speech today. You gave her permission to believe in herself, as a father trying to support his daughter. I cannot thank you enough. I read the email 3 times, each pass hitting differently. This was what mattered, not revenge against my family, not vindication for wrongs suffered, but creating space for someone else to become what they were meant to be, without fighting as hard as I'd fought. Christmas approached with its usual commercial insistence. My phone remained blessedly free from family contact. No guilt trip calls from mom, no awkward attempts at reconciliation from dad, no requests for money from Isabel. The silence felt less like abandonment and more like freedom. Christmas Day, I hosted 16 veterans for dinner at my home. We cooked together, laughed over burned rolls and oversalted gravy, told stories that made us remember why we'd survived when others hadn't. These people knew my scars without needing to see them, understood my silence without demanding explanation, celebrated my presence without requiring me to shrink. Around midnight, after everyone had left and I was washing the last of the dishes, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Ma'am, this is Lieutenant Sarah Chen. We met at your medal ceremony. I just wanted to say Merry Christmas and thank you again. My family still doesn't understand my choice, but I'm not quitting. Because you didn't." I typed back quickly. "Merry Christmas, Lieutenant. Stay strong. You're exactly where you're meant to be." Her response came seconds later. "You too, ma'am. You're exactly what I needed to find." I set the phone down and finished the dishes with a smile I felt all the way through. New Year's Eve arrived with snow blanketing Virginia in rare white silence. I spent the evening writing, my memoir now past 80,000 words, and growing into something that felt more important than I'd anticipated. The story wasn't about bitterness. It was about survival, about building identity without parental foundation, about finding family when blood relatives offer nothing but limitations. At 11:30, my phone rang, Mom's number. I stared at it through 4 rings, then answered on the 5th. "Victoria." Her voice sounded older, worn down by something I couldn't identify. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but it's New Year's Eve and I'm sitting here thinking about all the years I missed, all the times I chose wrong." I said nothing, letting her words fill the space between us. "I don't know how to fix what I broke. I don't know if I can fix it, but I wanted you to know I see it now. I see what I did to you." A pause, breath shaking. "And I'm sorry. I'm so, so sorry." The apology I'd wanted for 30 years landed like snow, soft but cold, beautiful but temporary. "I appreciate you saying that, Mom." My voice remained neutral. "But sorry doesn't rebuild what you demolished. It doesn't give me back the childhood where I felt valued. It doesn't erase 40 years of being second best." "I know, but maybe it's a start?" "Maybe, but a start doesn't mean going back to how things were. It means acknowledging that you destroyed something that can't be reconstructed the same way." "So what does it mean?" I looked out my window at falling snow, each flake unique and singular and complete without needing permission. "It means you live with the consequences of your choices, and I live with the freedom I built from your neglect." "That sounds lonely." "It's not lonely when you're surrounded by people who actually see you." Yet Mom's silence stretched long enough that I thought she'd hung up. "Then, can we try? Slowly? I don't expect forgiveness, but maybe communication?" I considered the question with all its complications. "Maybe, on my terms, with boundaries, and understanding that trust is earned over years, not conversations." "I'll take that." Relief flooded her voice. "Happy New Year, Mom." "Happy New Year, Victoria." After ending the call, I stood at my window watching snow accumulate in peaceful layers, covering old ground with new possibility. Forgiveness wasn't a moment. It was a process measured in seasons and choices, and deciding what kind of person you wanted to be beyond your trauma. I wasn't there yet. Maybe I'd never fully arrive, but refusing to try felt like letting them take one more thing, my capacity for growth beyond survival mode. January brought new challenges and opportunities in equal measure. A publisher contacted me about turning my memoir into a full book. 2 more high schools requested speaking engagements. The Veteran Center asked me to lead a mentorship program for recently discharged service members struggling with civilian transition. My calendar filled with purpose that felt earned rather than inherited. I also began meeting my mother for coffee every other Thursday. Stilted conversations that carefully avoided most of our history, while trying to build something that resembled neutral ground. We weren't mother and daughter. Not yet. Maybe never in the traditional sense. but we were two women trying to move forward despite catastrophic past choices. Isabel tried reaching out several times. I responded occasionally, brief messages that maintained distance without complete severance. She was working with a therapist, she told me, trying to understand her role in the family dysfunction. Good for her, genuinely. But her healing journey wasn't mine to facilitate. Dad never called. I didn't expect him to. Mid-February, Lieutenant Sarah Chen requested a meeting. We sat in a coffee shop near Fort Belvoir, steam rising from our cups while she explained her situation. My company commander is retiring. They're considering promoting from within, and several senior officers suggested me. But my family is pushing me to leave the military, get married, start having kids. Her hands wrapped around her coffee cup like it was the only stable thing in her universe. They say I'm wasting my life on a man's career. I'd heard variations of this story 100 times. It never got less infuriating. What do you want, Sarah? I want the promotion. I want to lead that company. I'm good at this, ma'am. I know I am. Then that's your answer. But my family, your family will adjust or they won't. But that's their choice, not yours to manage. I leaned forward, holding her gaze. You're 27 years old. You have maybe 40 years of career ahead of you. Are you going to spend them living someone else's vision of who you should be? Tears welled in her eyes. They'll be so disappointed. They're already disappointed because they don't see you clearly. So their disappointment isn't based on reality. It's based on an imaginary daughter who doesn't exist. The words hit her like revelation, visible in the way her posture changed from collapse to consideration. How did you do it? How did you keep going when your family didn't support you? I thought about the question with the weight it deserved. I decided their opinion of me mattered less than my opinion of myself. I decided to build a life so full of purpose that their absence became irrelevant. I paused. It wasn't easy. It hurt for years. But eventually the hurt transformed into fuel, and the fuel transformed into freedom. I want that, the freedom part. Then go get your promotion, Lieutenant. Lead your company, build your career, and let your family's disappointment be their problem, not yours. She left that coffee shop standing straighter than when she'd arrived. 3 weeks later, she sent me a photo of her promotion ceremony, captain's bars gleaming on her shoulders, smile radiant with earned achievement. Her family wasn't in the picture, but 20 soldiers stood behind her in formation, pride evident in every straight spine. She'd found her people, just like I'd found mine. March brought the first anniversary of my retirement from active duty. The Veterans Center threw a small celebration, 50 former soldiers gathering to mark the occasion with cake and stories and the kind of camaraderie that doesn't diminish with time. During the speeches, Sergeant First Class Marcus Johnson stood up unplanned. "Ma'am, I want to say something." He'd served under my command in Iraq, survived an IED blast that should have killed him. "You saved my life in 2008. Literally dragged me out of a burning vehicle while under fire. But that's not why I'm standing here." The room went quiet. "I'm standing here because you taught me something more important than tactics or survival. You taught me that being strong doesn't mean being hard, that leading means caring about your people more than your image, that success isn't about approval, it's about impact." He raised his glass. "To Colonel Hayes, who showed us all how to stand tall when the world tries to break you." Everyone stood, raising their drinks in unified response. I felt tears threatening for the first time in months, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming recognition of being truly seen. This was what family meant. Not obligation or blood ties or guilt-based loyalty, but choice, mutual respect, showing up because you wanted to, not because social pressure demanded it. That evening, I sat on my back porch with a glass of wine, watching the sun set over Virginia hills. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "I saw photos from your celebration online. You looked happy, really happy. I'm glad you found your people. Mom." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Thank you. I am happy." It was the truth. Finally, completely, without qualification. April brought speaking requests from 3 colleges, a podcast interview about women in military leadership, and an email from a literary agent who wanted to represent my memoir for major publication. My life was expanding in directions I'd never anticipated, built on foundations of hard-earned self-worth and chosen family. Late one night, finishing edits on my book's final chapters, I realized something profound. My family's rejection had felt like the end of everything when I was younger, but it had actually been the beginning, forcing me to build an identity based on internal strength rather than external validation. They'd meant to limit me. Instead, they'd freed me. Not intentionally, not generously, but the result remained the same. I'd become exactly who I needed to be, not despite them, but because of what I'd survived. That was the real story. Not revenge or vindication, but transformation, taking pain and alchemizing it into purpose. The end of April brought an unexpected package from Isabel. Inside was a small painting, abstract, like all her work, but something in the color choices and composition felt different, softer, more vulnerable. The note attached read, "I'm learning to see beyond what I was taught to see. This is my first attempt to paint what I should have seen in you all along. Isabel." I hung the painting in my study, not as forgiveness, but as acknowledgement that growth happens at different speeds for different people. My forgiveness, if it fully arrived, would be for me, not for them. As May arrived with flowering trees and warming air, I stood in my backyard watching new leaves unfurl in patient green persistence. Healing wasn't linear, forgiveness wasn't required. Family could be chosen rather than endured. And sometimes the greatest success was simply becoming yourself without permission. June arrived with the kind of heat that made Virginia shimmer like a mirage. My memoir's publication date was set for September, the advance large enough to fund the mentorship program I'd been designing for young women in military careers. The mornings now included video calls with 12 mentees scattered across 4 time zones. Each conversation reminded me why the years of invisibility mattered less than what I'd built from them. Lieutenant Sarah Chen called on a Tuesday, voice pitched higher than usual with barely contained excitement. "Ma'am, I got the company command. They announced it this morning." Pride surged through me, the kind that comes from watching someone step into their full potential. "Congratulations, Captain. You earned every bit of that." My parents didn't come to the ceremony. They said if I wasn't going to respect their wishes about my career, they wouldn't celebrate my choices. The echo of my own story resonated in her words, familiar pain across generations. "How are you handling it?" A pause, then strength crystallizing through the phone line. "I'm handling it by remembering what you taught me. Their absence is their choice, not my failure. And I had 30 soldiers there who were genuinely proud. That's my real family." After the call ended, I sat with the weight of impact, how one person's survival could become another person's roadmap. The pain I'd transformed was now transformation for others. My publisher sent the final cover design that afternoon, the title bold across a photograph of me in uniform. "Silent Valor, when family fails, chosen family prevails." They'd wanted to use a photo from the medal ceremony, but I'd insisted on something else. Me at 52, the day I retired, surrounded by my soldiers. No medals visible, just people who'd chosen to stand with me. July brought a phone call from someone I hadn't heard from in decades. "Victoria, it's Colonel Patricia Meadows. You probably don't remember me, but I was your tactical officer at West Point your junior year." Memory surfaced, a stern woman who'd pushed me harder than anyone, who'd seen potential I didn't know I possessed. "I remember you, ma'am. You taught me that being underestimated was an advantage, not a weakness." Her laugh came warm through the connection. "I'm calling because I just read the advance copy of your book. Victoria, it's extraordinary. But more than that, it's necessary. I've been teaching at West Point for 20 years now, and I see so many young women struggling with exactly what you survived." "What are you suggesting?" "Come speak to the cadets, share your story in person. Let them see what's possible when you refuse to shrink." The invitation felt like a circle completing itself, returning to the place that had first shown me my worth, now carrying proof that survival leads somewhere beyond mere endurance. I'd be honored. West Point in August looked exactly as I remembered, and completely different. The stone buildings remained unchanged, eternal as the discipline they represented. But I walked through them now as someone who'd proven every doubt wrong, not as the girl desperate for validation. The auditorium held 400 cadets, faces young and sharp with ambition. I stood at the podium in civilian clothes, the eagle pin my only nod to rank earned decades ago. 38 years ago, I sat where you're sitting. My voice carried trained projection, filling the space without strain. I was terrified I wasn't good enough, terrified that my family was right, that this was just a phase I'd grow out of. Attention sharpened across the audience, recognition flickering in eyes that knew doubt intimately. My family didn't attend my graduation from this institution, didn't acknowledge my commissioning, didn't show up for most of my career milestones. I let the words land without dramatization. And for years, I thought that meant something was wrong with me. A female cadet in the third row leaned forward, expression intense with identification. It took me decades to understand a truth I wish I'd known at 21. Other people's inability to see your value says everything about their limitations and nothing about your worth. I stepped away from the podium, removing the physical barrier between speaker and listener. Some of you come from families who celebrate you being here. Treasure that. Some of you come from families who think you're wasting potential on military service. I see you. And I'm here to tell you something crucial. The room held collective breath. You don't need their permission to become who you're meant to be. You don't need their approval to know you're valuable. You don't need their presence to validate your achievements. I paused, letting each sentence settle. What you need is your own certainty, built one choice at a time, that you're exactly where you belong. A male cadet near the back raised his hand. I nodded acknowledgement. But what if you're wrong? What if your family sees something you can't? Honest question, deserving honest answer. Then you fail on your own terms rather than succeeding by someone else's limited vision of who you should be. And failure you choose teaches more than success you resent. After the assembly, 37 cadets lined up to speak with me privately. Each carried variations of the same wound, families who didn't understand, who questioned their choices, who made them feel selfish for pursuing something beyond expectation. I gave every single one the same advice. Build your life based on who you are, not who others need you to be. The last person in line was a young woman who looked familiar in a way I couldn't immediately place. She approached with military bearing and uncertain eyes. "Ma'am, I'm Cadet Emma Hayes. I'm your niece. Isabel's daughter." The world tilted slightly, information rearranging itself into new configuration. Isabel had a daughter she'd never mentioned during any of our limited recent contact. A daughter currently standing at West Point in uniform. "Emma," I processed implications while maintaining composure. "Does your mother know you're here?" "She knows I'm at West Point. She's not happy about it, said I was throwing away opportunities in art to play soldier like you." Emma's chin lifted with defiance that reminded me painfully of my younger self. "That's why I wanted to meet you, to see if it's true. If someone can build a life in the military despite family rejection." Every word echoed across decades, my past reflected in her present. "Walk with me." We left the auditorium, finding a bench overlooking the Hudson River. Cadets passed in groups, their conversations floating past in fragments of ambition and anxiety. "Your mother and I have a complicated history." Understatement of catastrophic proportions. "I'm not going to tell you what to do regarding your relationship with her, but I will tell you this. You can love your family and still refuse to let them limit you." How do you do both? Love them and not let them hurt you? The question held every complexity I'd spent years navigating. You accept that their limitations aren't your responsibility to fix. You build boundaries that protect your growth. You find people who see you clearly and let them become your primary support system. I watched the river flow below, constant and indifferent to human struggle. And you forgive them not because they deserve it, but because carrying bitterness costs more than it's worth. Have you forgiven Grandma and Grandpa, my mom? I'm working on it. Some days better than others. Forgiveness isn't a destination. It's a choice you keep making. Emma's shoulders relaxed incrementally. Everyone at home thinks I'm crazy, that I should use my art talent, follow in mom's footsteps. But when I'm here, when I'm training and leading and pushing myself, I feel more like myself than I ever did painting. Then you have your answer. But what if I'm wrong? I turned to face her fully. Emma, listen carefully. The only wrong choice is the one you make trying to be someone you're not. If you fail at something you genuinely wanted, you'll survive. If you succeed at something you never wanted, you'll resent every achievement. She nodded slowly, tears threatening but not falling. Will you, can I contact you for advice? Absolutely. You're not alone in this, Emma. Not anymore. As she walked away, spine straight with renewed determination, I felt the generational pattern finally breaking. What I'd survived would ensure she didn't have to suffer the same isolation. That evening, I called Isabel for the first time in months. She answered on the third ring, suspicion clear in her greeting. Victoria? I met Emma today, at West Point. Silence stretched long enough that I thought she might have hung up. Then, she told you. She told me enough. Why didn't you mention you had a daughter? Because I was ashamed. The confession came raw, unfiltered. Ashamed that my daughter chose the path I spent my whole childhood watching our parents mock you for taking. Ashamed that she rejected everything I tried to teach her about art and creativity. Ashamed that she wanted to be like you instead of like me. The pain in her voice was real, however much it stemmed from flawed perspective. Isabel, she's not choosing me over you. She's choosing herself, just like I had to. But I've been a good mother. I supported her art, paid for lessons, encouraged every creative impulse, and she threw it all away for military service. Did you ever ask if art was what she wanted? Or did you assume it should be because it's what you wanted? The question landed in silence that confirmed I'd hit truth she wasn't ready to acknowledge. I don't know how to support this choice. Then learn. Because if you don't, you'll recreate exactly what Mom and Dad did to me. And Emma will spend decades building her life around the absence of your approval instead of the presence of your love. I don't know if I can. Then that's on you, not her. But I'm telling you this once, Isabel. If you make Emma choose between her authentic self and your acceptance, you'll lose her the way Mom and Dad lost me. I ended the call before she could respond, hoping the warning would take root before she caused damage that required decades to repair. September arrived with the kind of clarity that makes everything feel both ending and beginning simultaneously. My book released on a Tuesday, climbing bestseller lists faster than my publisher anticipated. The phone interviews started immediately. Morning shows wanting the inspirational military woman, podcasts wanting the family estrangement angle, magazines wanting the empowerment story for their demographic. I agreed to most, declined the ones that wanted to sensationalize rather than understand. The Today Show interview happened on a Friday morning, cameras and lights making the studio feel simultaneously intimate and exposed. The host, Michelle Torres, had done her research. Colonel Hayes, your book is resonating with thousands of readers, particularly women over 50 who feel invisible in their families. What do you want them to take from your story? I want them to understand that being overlooked doesn't mean being worthless. It means the people around you lack the capacity to see clearly. I kept my voice steady, aware of how many people might be watching who needed to hear this. Your value exists independent of recognition, and when you build your life on that foundation, other people's blindness becomes irrelevant. You write about choosing family rather than accepting the family you were born into. Some critics say that's giving up too easily on blood relatives. Some critics didn't spend 40 years being made invisible by the people who were supposed to love them most. No heat in my response, just fact. I didn't give up on my family. I stopped letting them define my worth. There's a difference. Your mother reached out after the medal ceremony. Are you reconciling? We're communicating, which is different from reconciling. Reconciliation requires acknowledging harm, changing behavior, and rebuilding trust over time. We're still in the acknowledgement phase. What would you say to viewers watching right now who are struggling with similar family dynamics? I looked directly into the camera, speaking to the person sitting alone in their kitchen, recognizing themselves in my story. You are not responsible for making people see your value. You are responsible for seeing it yourself and building a life that reflects that truth. Find your people, the ones who celebrate you without hesitation. Let them become your primary family, and give yourself permission to grieve the family you needed, but never had, while building the family you deserve. The interview went viral within hours. My phone exploded with messages from readers, viewers, people who'd been waiting their entire lives for someone to say those specific words. Among the hundreds of messages, one stood out. From my mother. I'm watching your interview. You're right about everything. I'm sorry it took me so long to see. Mom. I didn't respond immediately. Some messages needed time to settle before reaction, space to exist without immediate weight of expectation or forgiveness. October brought an unexpected invitation. The Veterans Center wanted to name their new mentorship wing after me. The dedication ceremony was scheduled for November 11th, Veterans Day. We've watched you build something extraordinary over the past year, Director James Patterson explained over coffee. You've mentored over 40 veterans through difficult transitions, funded scholarships for 3 young women pursuing military careers, created a support network that's now self-sustaining. This wing represents everything you've built: community, purpose, chosen family. The honor landed differently than the medal had. This wasn't recognition from government or institution. This was acknowledgement from the people who knew me most authentically, fellow survivors who understood the specific courage required to keep standing after everything tried to break you. I'm deeply grateful. Emotion roughened my voice. This work has been my healing. That's why it matters. You turned your pain into purpose. That's what we want to honor. The week before the dedication, I received a letter forwarded from my publisher, handwritten on yellow legal paper, dozens of pages filled with cramped script. The return address showed a women's correctional facility in Ohio. I almost didn't open it. Assumptions about what correspondence from a prison might contain making me hesitate. But something made me unfold those pages and start reading. Dear Colonel Hayes, my name is Jennifer Martinez. I'm serving 15 years for embezzlement, a crime I committed in desperation when my family made it clear I was worthless unless I could provide for them financially. I'm writing because another inmate gave me your book, and it saved my life. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but page by page. I recognized myself in your story. The invisible daughter, the one whose value was always conditional on being someone she wasn't, the one who made terrible choices trying to earn love that was never going to be freely given. I'm 43. I have 7 years left on my sentence, and I've spent the past 3 months since finishing your book doing something I've never done, building an identity based on who I actually am, not who others need me to be. I'm taking college courses through the prison education program. I'm leading a support group for women with family estrangement issues. I'm learning that my worth isn't tied to my mistakes or their conditional approval. I'm writing to say thank you, not for solving my problems. I have to do that, but for showing me that survival can become something more than just endurance. That transformation is possible even from the lowest points. You'll never meet me. I'll be 50 when I'm released, starting over with nothing. But because of your story, I know nothing isn't the same as worthless. Thank you for having the courage to share your pain. It gave me permission to examine mine. Jennifer Martinez, inmate number 847392. I read the letter 3 times, each pass hitting different emotional centers. This woman I'd never meet, who'd made choices I'd never faced, had found something in my story that changed her trajectory. That was the point of sharing trauma. Not catharsis for the storyteller, but transformation for the listener. I wrote back that same day, addressing the envelope to her inmate number, telling her that her life wasn't over, and her value was inherent rather than earned. Told her to contact me when she was released if she needed employment references or support. Some bridges you build not knowing who'll need to cross them. Veterans Day arrived cold and clear, the kind of November morning that makes every breath visible. 300 people gathered for the dedication ceremony, most of them veterans I'd worked with over the past 18 months. The building wasn't large, just a renovated warehouse space with offices for one-on-one counseling, a common area for group support, and a small library of resources. But it represented something larger than physical space. It represented the family I'd built from intentional choice, rather than obligatory blood ties. Director Patterson stood at the podium, speech prepared, but his emotion genuine. We dedicate this space to Lieutenant Colonel Victoria Hayes, who taught us that family isn't about biology. It's about who shows up, who believes, who stands beside you when standing becomes the hardest thing you'll ever do. He gestured to the bronze plaque being unveiled beside the entrance, the Hayes Wing, where chosen family begins. Applause rose around me, people I'd helped now celebrating the impact of mutual support. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the front row, her parents absent but 30 soldiers flanking her in solidarity. Emma stood beside Sarah, her West Point uniform crisp despite the chill. Isabel nowhere visible in the crowd. When they invited me to speak, I walked to the podium carrying 30 years of isolation transformed into connection. I spent most of my life feeling invisible. The confession came easier now, worn smooth by repeated sharing. Made invisible by people who should have seen me clearly. And for too long, I believed invisibility was my natural state, that being overlooked was somehow my fault. Heads nodded throughout the audience, recognition rippling through people who'd felt the same erasure. It took me until my 50s to understand a truth that could have saved me decades of pain. Being invisible to the wrong people doesn't make you invisible. It just means you're standing in the wrong room. More nods, some people wiping eyes discreetly. This wing represents the right room, where we see each other clearly, where value isn't conditional on being someone we're not, where family means showing up, believing in each other, and refusing to let anyone feel as alone as we once did. I paused, gathering the final thought that had been crystallizing over months of healing. To everyone here who's been made to feel invisible, you're not. You never were. You were just surrounded by people whose vision was too limited to see clearly. But we see you. Your chosen family sees you. And that visibility isn't a gift we're giving you. It's the truth we're acknowledging about who you've always been. The applause that followed felt like embrace, collective recognition that survival shared becomes strength multiplied. After the ceremony, Emma approached with characteristic directness. Aunt Victoria, can I ask you something difficult? Always? Do you think my mom will ever accept my choices? Really accept them, not just tolerate them? The question deserved honesty rather than comfort. I don't know. People change at different rates, and some don't change at all. But here's what I've learned. You can't pause your life waiting for someone else's evolution. You build the life you need now, and if they catch up later, that's a bonus rather than a requirement. That's what I was afraid you'd say. Because you know it's true. She nodded slowly. Mom sent me an email last week. Said she's trying to understand, but it hurts watching me choose a path so different from what she wanted for me. What did you respond? I told her that her pain about my choices wasn't something I could fix. That I love her, but I love myself more, and that has to be enough. Pride surged through me, recognition of exactly the boundary I'd needed to establish decades earlier. That was the right answer. She hasn't responded. Give her time, and if time doesn't help, know that her limitations aren't your responsibility. Emma hugged me suddenly, fiercely, gratitude and grief tangled in the embrace. When she pulled back, tears tracked down her face, but her voice stayed steady. Thank you for surviving. It gave me permission to become myself. After she walked away, I stood in the November cold, watching people filter out of the ceremony. Sarah Chen approached from the side, her expression contemplative. Ma'am, I need to tell you something. She took a breath. My parents called last week. They want to visit, to see my command, to understand what I do. That's significant progress. It is. But I realized something. I don't need them anymore. Not the way I used to, because you helped me build something stronger than their approval. I have soldiers who respect me, a career I'm proud of, and purpose that doesn't require their validation. She smiled. So if they come, great. If they don't, I'm still complete. That's the difference between healing and waiting for rescue. You healed yourself. You showed me how. Watching her leave, I understood that my greatest legacy wouldn't be medals or military service. It would be this: teaching others that survival can become thriving, that wounds can become wisdom, that being broken by the people who should have protected you doesn't mean staying broken. December arrived with the kind of cold that makes Virginia inhospitable. My book remained on bestseller lists, speaking invitations continued flooding in, and the mentorship program now had a waiting list of young women seeking guidance. On December 15th, I received an unexpected package, heavy, carefully wrapped, postmarked from Brooklyn. Inside was a painting unlike anything Isabel had created before. Not abstract, but photorealistic. It showed two women standing back to back, one in military uniform, one holding a paintbrush, not looking at each other, but supporting each other's weight. The note attached said simply, "I'm trying to see. It's harder than I thought, but I'm trying. Isabel." I hung the painting in my study beside the first one she'd sent, watching their relationship across the wall, from abstract acknowledgement to concrete effort. Forgiveness was happening without my conscious permission, growing like something organic rather than constructed. Not because she deserved it yet, but because holding on to anger required more energy than letting it transform into understanding. Christmas approached with its usual commercial insistence. My phone remained blessedly free from family contact until December 23rd, when Mom called with a tentative invitation. "Would you consider joining us for Christmas dinner? Just family, no pressure." I took 12 hours to decide, weighing obligation against healing, finally agreeing with strict boundaries. I'd come but leave on my terms. Christmas dinner was careful, cautious, 5 people navigating decades of damage over turkey and strained conversation. Emma asked the hard questions nobody else would. My parents attempted accountability. Isabel struggled with honesty about her privilege. Progress happened in millimeters, not miles, which was enough. I left after 2 hours. Small steps, not marathons. New Year's Eve found me alone in my study, exactly where I wanted to be. At 11:30, messages flooded in from the people who mattered. Sarah Chen, Emma, Marcus Johnson. 20 more reminders that impact ripples beyond visibility. At midnight, Mom called. "Happy New Year, Victoria. I'm not giving up on becoming someone worthy of being in your life." "That's your choice to make, Mom." After hanging up, I stepped onto my back porch, watching fireworks paint the Virginia sky in temporary brilliance. 55 years old, Medal of Honor recipient, best-selling author, mentor to dozens. But more important than any of that, finally, completely free. I'd spent 40 years believing my worth required their recognition, spent decades building despite their blindness, and now I understood the truth that mattered most. My value had never been in question, only their ability to see it. And whether they learned to see clearly didn't change who I'd always been. Someone strong enough to survive invisibility and generous enough to ensure others didn't have to. That was enough. That was everything.